Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, dear students, I'm happy to welcome all of you for the second panel of today. For the people that are arriving, you can find your places and seats silently in the back, please. Thank you all for being here and for coming, and a special thank you to my dearest panelists for taking your time, sharing your expertise with us today. My name is Antonia Stephan. I'm a first-year ETHIA student at the Academy here, and it's my honor to walk you through today's discussion. Without further ado, let me allow you to introduce the panelists to you. I will begin with Brigadier General Dr. Nikolaus Rottenberger. He's a senior officer in the Austrian Armed Forces with extensive experience in military diplomacy, defense policy, and international relations, and he is currently heading the Military Diplomacy Division in the Austrian Ministry of Defense. Then we have Dr. Klaus Vietze. Very warm welcome. He is deputy head of the mission and head of the political section at the German embassy here in Vienna. And as a senior career diplomat, he brings extensive experience on China and Japan, which will offer us valuable insights into today's shifting global order. And last but not least, we have Roger Hilton. I think he's familiar to most of you. He's an alumnus of the DA, so welcome back in the holy halls. And Roger is currently working as a defense fellow and media presenter at GLOBSEC, and he previously led the NATO 2030 private sector dialogues and regularly provides expert commentary for international media, including as a foreign policy and international security analyst for CTV Montreal. Now that we're all familiar, let us start to dive directly into the topic. We're going to speak in the context of panel 2 about transformations, about shifting powers, and about shifting rules. And I would like to set the scene first a little bit and then pose a question to you. So what we are seeing, or what we can observe, is that the rules-based international order, like we came to know it in the Westphalian system, appears to be under considerable strain. The United States, long seen as key architect and guarantor of the system, has taken steps that some might interpret as undermining elements of that very order, including trade measures against allies and the withdrawal of international institutions. Simultaneously, we see emerging powers are inserting themselves, regional blocs are gaining traction, and hierarchies that have defined the international order for decades are being challenged. So again, the Westphalian order, built on state sovereignty, non-interference, adherence to rules, seems fundamentally giving away. Others argue we are entering something entirely new for which we don't even have a name yet. So my question to you is, what do you think about this? Are we witnessing, in the sense of the panel, a transformation of the system, maybe even its breakdown? And what does it look like from where you sit? Dr. Nikolaus Rottenberger, I would invite you to answer that first question. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the invitation. It's great to be back in this magnificent hall here at the Diplomatic Academy, being myself an alumni of this institution. It's very glad to be here. Thank you for the invitation, the interesting question, and you all know the multiple stressed dictum of the German Federal Chancellor Scholz after February's 2022 invasion of Russia in the Ukraine. He talked about Zeitenwende, turning point. Yeah. And I keep in mind what I recently heard from a well-known German political scientist, Ulrike Franke, and she said, well, if you consider what happened in 2022, in February 2022, it's more a weather change. But what we experience in the international arena for the last year is more a climate change. And I just want to stress that we are not, what we're seeing now, the changing of the transformation of international relations, the international order. What we see now is not simply evolving, it's contested, it's revised, and in some areas dismantled in a way. And I just want to give from an Austrian perspective 2 defining characteristics why I think this change is very significant maybe even irreversible. One thing is the return of, I would say, hard security to Europe. And hard security, I mean, I understand as a part of an approach of hard power versus soft power. And the return of conventional warfare in Europe on the continent has profound implications on all European states. You see this in the reactions of NATO, in the reaction of the European Union, and finally, the way Austria acted or reacted to that in the way. Yeah? Neutrality for us as Austrian remained a cornerstone of our identity, but yet it doesn't mean that it is a passive strategic passivity. Another point is the blurring of war and peace. This characteristic is also something I found is profound for these changes. In this erosion of the traditional boundary between war and peace, we have these hybrid activities, cyber operation, disinformation campaigns, the oil and gas issue, oil and gas as means of coercion, economic coercion. These have become tools of a strategic competition. And hard power no longer begins with tanks crossing the borders. It starts much earlier. This is also something new in this transformation process. It often starts with network intrusions, supply chain manipulations, strategic infrastructure acquisitions, and later leads up to intelligence operations, what we see now in Europe. Looking to Berlin, what we experienced in Berlin in February, up to sabotage or what's called in the cyber domain the so-called advanced persistent threats, APTs. Yeah. So this is nothing new, and we know answers for that, and this is what we call the comprehensive defense approach. This is nothing new. But another issue, and the final point, is the multiplication of power centers in this transformation. So we move from a unilateral US-dominated world, or you might even say for the last decade it was maybe still a bipolar world, China, US, to a multipolar world, where middle powers gains more emphasis and more importance. They contest the ruling system. They influence global rules, China does. So economic statecraft, strategic investments, and technological dominance will serve as instrument of geopolitical leverage in this system. Thank you.
Thank you for this elaborative answer. I don't know, do my other panelists also want to say something about their assessment of the state of the international order at this point? Dr. Klaus Vietze?
Yes. So, we had a couple of weeks ago, we had the Munich Security Conference, and its title was Under Destruction. I mean, we heard a lot about wrecking ball politics, about the chainsaw approach of many countries to the international system. And Chancellor Merz even said that the existing international order as we knew it, based on rights and rules, no longer exists. I think the part as we knew it, in German it was just a small word so, yeah, the internationale Ordner so, wie wir es kennen, yeah. That makes it a little bit less dramatic. But still, I think we see a bleak picture, but not a black picture. Yeah, it's a little bit more colorful than the wrecking ball might express this. I mean, the international system is clearly under attack from several sides, especially the development and humanitarian systems are in an existential crisis. But many important elements of the international order still exist, still work. the situation is grave, but not entirely hopeless. Yeah, so we see that also that the institutions do suffer for many years already from internal problems. They really do need reform, but they don't need the wrecking ball. We have the UN Reform Initiative UN 80, a significant new attempt to enhance efficiency in the UN system, supported by most member states, among them also US and China, and a lot of countries from the global south. So in a way, this wrecking ball caused also some dynamics, which we didn't have before. Well, for Europe, a political commentator recently said foreign policy vacation is over. Yeah, so we have to adapt quickly and strategically to the new reality. And our basis is that we absolutely need a rules-based international order. It's not just our choice to stand for values and, for instance, also for the development goals. Values are for Europe raison d'être. We have to keep the compass. Not because everything is more difficult now, that doesn't mean that we can forget what is right and what is wrong. We still have to keep this compass. And we need to think about our children, about next generations, and we have to be able to look them into the eyes, and we have to be on the right side of history, actually. What do we do now? We need swift action with partners right now, within and beyond the EU, to preserve, reform, and in some cases maybe even re-establish a rules-based international order. It cannot be the same order as today, that's clear, but we need on a kind of a EU plus partners priority list, which can be different partners for different issues. But I still see many areas where the US, China, and others will cooperate. It's proliferation, especially the nuclear non-proliferation, where the US also might think twice to attack the more technical organizations, especially here in Vienna. We have also issues like health, climate, water, development, where we will have to find partners, often not the US, especially right now, but maybe a little bit later, but where other partners might be very interested to step in and cooperate with us on issues where they are also interested. On the stepping in part, I think we speak a little bit later.
Yeah, thank you so much for this positive assessment. It's good to see a hopeful framing. I think that's what we all need in these times. And I would love to dive deeper into the topic of opportunities also for Europe that are rising. Also speaking about the European emancipation and the challenges that arise from it. I just want to give Roger one last word in regard to the opening question so that we have a common starting point for the discussion.
Antonia, thank you so much I see the DA students, and I'm just happy to be here not writing exams, specifically any economic exams. I really want to take down the expectations. I hope nobody's expecting Carney energy at Davos. We've heard from the panelists already, but the sign has come down, right, about the facade of international rules-based order. I love that a German diplomat is so optimistic, which is normally the rule for a Canadian, but I'm actually going to be quite pessimistic. I have a 20-year-old Austrian-Canadian strudel daughter, and when I wake up every morning, it is nauseating and dizzying to see how the news is going. I'll give you sort of the Canadian perspective, and I would say very bluntly that what is going on in the world right now is beyond frightening. In my country, from coast to coast, things that you took for granted, partnerships, deeper integration with the United States, have now been thrown by the wayside. And that's all right if there's policy decisions or you want to reorient doctrine, but I think this has come as a huge shock to people in Canada on the tone in which we've been talked about, people questioning our sovereignty. And again, speaking as a Canadian, not as a member of GLOBSEC, the disrespect that the administration has given calling Prime Minister Trudeau and Prime Minister Carney now governor. Undoubtedly, the system is changing because my country is especially in shock that we did not win the gold medal in hockey. So things are really changing. I think the panelists have really outlined already sort of the big picture issues, Antonia, but I think sort of working in the media and the news cycle, maybe there's a couple of things I can just take out that didn't get a lot of coverage. And I think those are issues that really speak to sort of the really troubling time we're living in. So as I said, one of the things that really keeps me up right now is the threat of nuclear proliferation, New START ending. All of us here in this room are, people under 30 who love Taylor Swift. You lived with such stability and you had no idea how good you had it in terms of predictability and Russia-United States dialogue on these issues. Just like that, there's no more arms control between two of the nuclear powers. On top of that, there was reports this week that China is now testing new weapons, to expand their nuclear arsenal, who's also changing their doctrine. If that wasn't enough, that you had China building up their arsenal, a recent report by, I don't know what Science magazine, what it has, but 95% of simulations on AI, when they got into wargaming, chose to use nuclear weapons. And then on top of that, you have a fight going on right now between Anthropic and the Pentagon, and you finally have an AI company pushing back about you can't use the software for it. You had the Baltic states and Poland who have left the Ottawa Treaty, which is a foundational treaty, I think from 1997, about anti-personnel mines, who are building the new Maginot Line. They're building the Baltic Defense Line. You have Christine Lagarde, you had bank bosses in the financial capital of London calling for an alternative to MasterCard. And as you talked about, sort of hard power is no longer just digital infrastructure. And I think two things that have also really gone underwards is press censorship. Something that really struck me, both as a Canadian who's living here in Europe, is the hostility that the administration has showed towards the EU, and now how the Department of Homeland Security is building a website to circumvent EU law, to allow Europeans to digest hate speech and all types of awful stuff. And Brigadier General, I'm so happy you touched on it, but something that has completely been forgotten and is almost a faux pas to be talking about right now is climate security and climate security policy. With Secretary Jens Stoltenberg, we had somebody who wanted to take advantage of this. He wanted to make tanks and battalions more susceptible to mitigation, and now we're back to old commodities, and it's just unbelievable. You have the Pentagon trying to source energy from coal. So, long story short, my head is in a pretzel. I drink too much coffee, and I'm looking forward to getting your reaction.
Yeah, thank you so much, Roger, for the assessment. Do you feel like you want to reply to this, or okay? No, then I think that was speaking a lot about the drivers of disruption. Also, that is topic of the next panel. I would like to go deeper into what we already spoke about, the role of Europe, and I also followed the Munich Security Conference. As a German, also very close to German politics. And the German Chancellor Merz, he's following a policy of European emancipation, calling Europeans or calling for the European Union to become more independent from the USA, from China, from Russia, which I believe is very important given the times that we are in right now. And yesterday, actually, Chancellor Merz came back from his visit to China where he did some economic meetings. Dr. Klaus Vietze, you're maybe best placed to speak about this. Is this already a sign of Europe trying to establish themselves as a middle power as we are in this moment of transformation? How would you read that new tone in Germany?
I'm not yet in the position to really comment on Merz's visit to China. Yeah, but I've been working for Angela Merkel from 2008 to 2014. First 4 years in the China desk in Berlin, and then in Beijing as head of the political department. And many things I see right now look awfully familiar. Yeah, it was always a difficult balance to take. It was always a give and take, and we were not always successful, but we were pragmatic and we were looking for common ground, despite all the difficult questions. And I think that's exactly what Chancellor Merz did on this trip to China this time. There's clearly, whether he wants it or not, there's a signal to the international community as well. Yes, but the main outcome, I would say, is critical cooperation. Critical in many fields we know well. Everybody knows about the trade difficulties, human rights situation, and so on. Yeah, but there's also the attempt to look for issues where we can cooperate. And this might be an outcome of new multipolarity, that this has a certain new dynamic. In difference to Russia, I see China as China's not applying the wrecking ball to the international system based on rules and order. It's rather trying to shape it. And there might be issues where this attempt to this approach might also be devastating. The International Court of Justice, the human rights organizations in Geneva, where you see it is hollowed out by the attempt of China to shape it. But there are other areas where you might very well find some common ground. That might be difficult. It might be a China first approach from China, as always. That's not an American invention. But you have to look at your partners and try to understand what's possible and what's not possible. And I think no more arms control. I agree that we are in a difficult situation there, but we have been there before. And we had the task to build up arms control systems. We had the task to build up a nuclear facility here in Vienna who can help us to stop nuclear testing. We had all those step-by-step issues. And don't tell me people in the 70s, in the 80s were in a more difficult situation than we are right now. That's not true.
Yeah, but I just want to push back because at least back with Brezhnev, when you had SALT I and SALT II, there was really a dynamic between the Kremlin and Washington who at least recognized that there would be Armageddon if we got on it. Now nobody's going to the table. And it's not just Moscow and Washington. What advantage or motivation does China have to go and sit down right now when they're trying to expand it?
Yeah, but then you have to look further back. I mean, maybe we are in a pre-Helsinki situation again. And at that time as well, you had diplomats on all sides, which in Moscow, I think, would be very dangerous. What they did, especially ambassador to Berlin, who later became chief negotiator for Russia in Helsinki. But at that time, with the Russian governments we had then, it was same kind of feeling. You can't talk to them, but that changed with persons. I mean, I'm from East Berlin. That might be an issue in this discussion. You never know who thought the Berlin Wall would fall. I worked on North Korea. Who thought that Kim Jong-il would blow up his nuclear sites in 2009, 2010? when I started working in Vienna, it was our dream that we would have a control staff from the IAEA in North Korea. And after 2 years, we managed to do that. Yeah, work for diplomats. You want to become diplomats. Yeah, but without a basic, I know right now we are in a different dynamic. Yeah, but don't lose this optimism, don't lose track, and don't think it was ever easy.
Dr. Vietze, I also have to reply on that, what you said. Compared to the situation in the Cold War, where we experienced proxy wars outside, let's say, Europe, yeah, in other continents or in regions outside Europe, we currently have a situation that we have a hot war very close to here.
Yes.
Yeah? This is so different to the experience we had in the Cold War with short interventions in Czechoslovakia, short interventions in Hungary, the uprising '53 in GDR and something, and the suppression of it. This is completely different. We have now more than 4 years. We're in the 5th year of hot war in the Ukraine, and we shall not forget what has been also already published in the media. The threshold for the usage of nuclear weapons has been lowered by the Russian Federation. The Russian Federation threatened the use of tactical nuclear weapons. I think it was the issue. One of the issues was Kherson, the withdrawal of Russian forces from Kherson to the south, the Crimea, and it was at the end of the day. This is published. This is not intelligence reports. I'm leaking. Yeah? This is something that it was at the end of the day. The chairman of the Joint Chief of Staff, who had a call with the Russian Chief of Defense, and said, please don't do it. What shall we do? How can we support that you don't use tactical nuclear weapons in Europe? And we shall not forget, nuclear weapons are political arms, political weapons. Once you use it, you open the gates of hell. Yeah? That's the point. Yeah? They are here not to be used. Yeah? That's our understanding. But then we come to the point about Europe. This is our perception, our threat perception is completely outdated. Our Western European threat perception, because we're living in a completely different world. So we praise ourselves in the European Union as a soft power. Yeah? But what it needs now is strategic autonomy, strategic responsibility. It needs to give our instruments, soft power instruments, deterrence, the leverage of hard power. This is something what's needed now, what's urgently needed. And when the German Chancellor Merz, I'm not talking now in my function as a member of the Austrian MOD, but more a private glimpse on the issue. If Chancellor Merz goes to the PRC and discusses economic issues, and the Chinese discuss economic issues with him, with the German delegation. When the French president goes to Beijing, they discuss with him geopolitical issues, because France has nuclear weapons. France has as a permanent seat in the Security Council, and France cherishes for decades, if not for centuries, geopolitical thinking, geostrategic visions. And Germans and Austrians do much lesser. And we have to restart the whole process and rethink our threat perception and the options we have to counter those threats. Yeah?
If I just may respond a little bit, I mean, also for the audience, what has really stood out is I'm so thankful that you think it's optimistic and we don't want to stay so down. But this is uncharted thinking about what diplomats or policymakers in Ottawa have to do. I mean, with all due respect, sometimes it seems as a Canadian we're living next to a drunk predator. And again, your expertise in Asia, it is unthinkable for everybody in the room that you have a country like Japan where there are now whispers about, we need our own nuclear weapons. Right. Nuclear umbrella doesn't exist anymore. South South Korea. And I hope that they all come to their senses and realize that nuclear weapons is such a waste of money, of investment, of talent, and that we have such bigger things to have to do. But this is the respect of the countries if they feel as if they have no other alternative. And the same could be said where some of the most popular op-eds and commentaries in Canada have been about bringing back conscription and, starting to look at what a nuclear program would look like when you have, the Trump administration, whatever you want to say, threatening a NATO ally. Mm-hmm. And then again, on top of it, Lindsey Graham, senator from South Carolina or North Carolina, completely disrespecting the Danish PM, saying, and I quote, "I don't give an F who owns Greenland." I mean, this is no way that you talk to allies at all. So I think it's well within the respect of all of those countries to consider how can we defend our sovereignty and ensure, the survivability of our state.
Thank you all so much. You would like to add something, Dr. Vietze?
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree. I mean, we need in Europe, we have a hot war going on. We need credible hard power to secure our existence. And even if we are very lucky to preserve our way of life, even. Yeah? And all that is under threat, completely clear. And in Germany, we are actually doing a lot, at least to build up the Bundeswehr and to have a more credible defense. I would not completely agree. We still have NATO. We still have, also for the Russians, a credible deterrence. They would not so easily attack a NATO country. There's still something. We have to work on it. We have to work on it hard. Sure, but I want to say is that's not the only thing we have to do. If we look to the international system, there's also a task, and we don't want to pick up bits and pieces in a couple of years. We should do our best to preserve with partners what is still there. That's the only thing. That at the same time, we have to rebuild defense capabilities with NATO. We have to have a stronger EU process of decision-making. All those issues are by far not where they should be. But I think the work is going on. There's a lot of energy, a lot of money, a lot of personal engagement going also in the hard security areas. We have the same, not the same, but this oscillating which comes in our transatlantic relations is certainly not helpful. But we also see other personalities. Also, if you go to the international system here, especially here in Vienna, you will meet many, many people from the US who build it, who are full power behind it still. So there's still hope, I said. There's no certainty. But that it's not, this situation will not last forever is also an option.
If I just may, though, and again, it's I can sort of be the devil's advocate a little bit. Before the Munich Security Conference at the last NATO Defense Ministerial, which was also the 33rd Rammstein format before it, you had the Undersecretary of War, crazy title, Elbridge Colby, who says, "We live in an interspace system, not values-based." And is that not just the clearest expression of what the priorities of the system are for the United States moving forward? I agree with Chancellor Merz, and the Prime Minister has also talked about variable geometry and Canada having to work with other partners on other things. But the sign is blinking right now where we're going.
Yes,
and right. I just think whether it's the Letta or Draghi report, there's enough evidence for what Europe needs to do to stand up and be mature. Yes, they've had safe, and building a strategic culture does not happen overnight, right? Just like the Zeitenwende. But as I said, the more we try to, I speak for myself, the more Europe tries to bury its head in the sand a little bit. You have Euroclear. What are all these what is the issue on this? They can't even get the sanction package over the board. So, as I said, it's a lot of hard work, and it's important people like you and your government to try to move this forward.
Thank you so much. I just want to shift the conversation a little bit because time is running out. So we spoke about that we have a lot of defenders of the international liberal rules-based orders. Many countries, especially Europe, have the interest to maintain the system, but we also see threats. So we also see powers like Russia and China actually deliberately attacking this order and promoting something that is entirely different. So I think my question would be, how do their approaches differ in actually attacking this order? Because I think they do use very different strategies, and what is the impact of that? How would that look like if one of them succeeds?
I think we touched on it a little bit. I mean, there's absolutely no sort of sophistication the way Russia does it, right? It's a wrecking ball, and they try to do it. It's much more dangerous, it's much more covert, and it's much more persuasive the way China does it, the way they're trying to stack positions in the security, in United Nations offices, whether it's financial, working with African Union and building partnerships. I think this is a much longer term project that how the Chinese want to shape it. And you spoke on it a little bit earlier about how they want to shape it. They don't want. Christmas has come so early for Xi Jinping. They cannot believe the luck they are getting right now. And just as the examples where you had European leaders coming for trade delegations, there was Canadians who are in prison for close to 200 for over a year in China, and then you still had the prime minister have to come and do it. So the options have never been stronger or deeper right now for China to wield influence. And the threats from the Trump administration about if you do this, we're going to impose 10,000% tariffs on it, it is having the exact opposite effect. So in that sense, I think China has a very targeted, a very comprehensive long-term strategy about how they want to shape it. And at this point, unless anybody disagrees with me, Russia is a vassal state of China in terms of what it does.
Mm. Yeah, completely agreeing with you. I think what if we think stressing Russia's development for the last couple of years, when President Putin started the invasion in 2022, I think he hardly imagined that he would have 1,000 kilometers longer border with NATO as a result within a year.
Employee of the month.
That he's still in the quagmire of this Ukraine war and this campaign, holding only 20% of Ukraine territory. Right now, things in a bigger picture, these changes, I'll say also what's happening on the battlefield, on the ground in Ukraine, has an impact, has a global impact in many ways. So, countries, middle powers learn to be more self-sufficient. They're looking for autonomy. I think what we see now, I would also be carefully saying that Iran will see, or in the position in Tehran is for sure that we don't want to dismantle our nuclear program, because this is, I think, what's common sense. If the Ukrainians would have had kept the nuclear arsenal, what was on the, so to say, on Ukraine territory of the dissolution of the Soviet Union, and they would have kept it, there would have been certainly no Russian invasion. That's for sure. That's for sure. This is a lesson everybody draws from this conflict. It's in a nutshell. Yeah. Okay.
I think that's a very valuable assessment of the situation. Thank you so much. Also, since we're coming to an end of our discussion now, I quickly have one last question touching upon the topic of diplomacy, because in the end we are at the Diplomatic Academy. So if we all agree that the rules-based order is transforming or eroding, diplomacy is going to lose the framework it has operated within for decades. So my question would be, how do diplomats navigate this new world? And what, in your opinion, is the single most important thing that diplomacy has to get right in the next 5 years? Maybe Dr. Klaus Vietze, if you'd like to go first.
Yeah, if you need optimism again for your future careers, at least I think you will if you go into diplomacy, you will have one of the most important jobs that are coming. But you need also a basis. You need to know what you want to achieve. And with this kind of thinking, you can really do a lot to overcome, to reform, to re-establish an international system, which might be the basis for all. I mean, we have the wrecking ball, but you are the ones. You have to understand, you are the ones. If you go into a diplomatic service, it's up to you. To rethink, to reform, to restructure, to find friends, to make partners. You can be in a bilateral way very useful. Maybe you are a China or Japan expert, can help to deepen the understanding with partners like that. Or you get into climate or in armament issues. But there are so many important jobs in this field, and I wish you all the best.
Let me add on that, because I'm a special breed, different to Dr. Vietze. I'm both a military officer and I work in the field of military diplomacy. I'm a graduate of this institution. I also thought about the impact of these developments on diplomacy, and I have a couple of points. One is that diplomacy must become a strategic integrator for the future. Integrates military deterrence, economic instruments, technological policy, so something rather new for traditional diplomats, and strategic communication. Second, diplomacy will become a risk manager in this fragmented world, in this great power competition. In crisis communication channels will be essential. Escalation and de-escalation management will become essential. Confidence building measures, especially what the OSCE is stressing, will regain importance. And diplomacy also must be a coalition builder in the future. So build on issue-based coalitions, that's a matter of fact. We will depart a little bit from this moral politics. If I'm not mistaken, there was a German Secretary of Foreign Affairs talking about feministic approach in foreign policy. I think we're a bit away from that. We will have to strengthen through diplomacy the partnership with what it's called the Global South, or these new middle powers, and promote rules in these emerging important domains like cyber and artificial intelligence. And then I think that I will find support from you from that. Diplomacy for us will need to be a guardian of norms. In international humanitarian law, non-proliferation regimes, I agree with you very much on that. And for example, maritime law, a very important issue. Think about supply chain management and other economic issues, And diplomacy in a hybrid security environment will find also its new role. This is something very new we have to look at, and diplomacy needs to be backed by credible hard power. That's also quite, I think, a takeaway. Thank you very much.
I'll try to unpack it. So obviously the most important thing in the next 5 years is that Canada regains the gold medal against the USS in hockey. Okay, so 5-year priority, I would say immediately for Europe, it's a ceasefire for Ukraine with a security guarantee and not a comprehensive plan. We've been talking about that forever, but I think that at least is something that will bring some stability. It will free up capital and maneuverability for Europe and for allies of it. Longer term, within that 5-year period, it would at least be the start of some sort of comprehensive arms control discussion, right? Not a treaty per se, but bringing people to the table and starting to frame out what it would look like. Brigadier General, I kind of disagree a little bit with what the future of diplomacy looks like, and this is not to discourage anybody, but I mean, like, what if you look at the international landscape right now and you say who is doing the major diplomatic negotiations, it's not formally trained diplomats, which is a crazy idea that you have real estate people like Kushner and Witkoff negotiating deals in the Kremlin. Canada has also responded to it. They have recalled their ambassador, who was a formal diplomat, and now we have a former private equity chief, who's now Canada's ambassador doing there. And I think it's a bit of a scary thing, but if you look at also some of the examples, Brigadier General, I mean, like the Swiss, for instance, I mean, who would have thought when you woke up in Bern, you get slapped with 39% tariffs? How did they solve that problem? They sent the head of FIFA, not to mention all of the heads of these like horlogerie, like all of the big clocks, right? The private sector. They opened up Rolex opened up their US Open box to everybody. And now miraculously on Trump's desk, there's a karat gold, 24 karat gold watch a little bit. So I think diplomacy now will be a mix of formally trained diplomats who actually get into the nitty gritty of dividing it. But tete-a-tete, it seems to be more the private sector or non-trained diplomats are there also in the tech world.
Can I respond to that?
Yeah,
Quickly,
a quick comment.
Quickly. Yeah. I think it's not new that there are different forms of diplomacy besides traditional forms of diplomacy. We know the four-track diplomacy theory was the first track, so the official channels, but we do have examples. I mean, these are very good points you're bringing. I think Steve Witkoff, Jared Kushner, Kirill Dmitriev for President Putin. But we had this kind of forms of diplomacy in the past as well. We had back-channel diplomacy in the Oslo process and leading to the Oslo Accords. We had it, those who serious students of international relations know the influential book Essence of Decision about the different channels of communication of the Kennedy administration to Khrushchev. To solve the Cuban Missile Crisis. This is nothing new. We will have to deal with that. It's still existing. So if a U.S. administration in the past sends a former president, Jimmy Carter, to North Korea or to negotiate or to take care of or look at what possibilities of future negotiations are on the table. This is nothing new. Yeah? Yeah. We are just surprised about the significance of these persons, because one shall not forget those who we are trained in the training for becoming diplomats. What's very important for diplomats, and please correct me if I'm wrong, is reporting. Yeah, it's very important. So if you had negotiations, you have to write down what has been said. Yeah, this will be exchanged between those teams negotiating, and then you write a report, and that's the record. Mm-hmm. You keep the records. What we learn from the media is that those envoys do not keep any records. We don't know what's discussed, what has been discussed. Yeah? Yeah. This is something frightening me a little bit. Yeah. So you never know what you hear. Is that what really has been said in these negotiations? Yeah. That's the difference from what we learn here in this institution, or what is done in practice in established embassies by professional personnel. Yeah.
But Birgit, just the last thing before the Q&A, but if you just look at this, way before the Greenland situation, when you had the PM Fredriksson in Denmark, and she was still trying to navigate how do we deal with Trump, who was the person she called? It was the chief of Maersk, the largest shipping company. She could have called Anders Fogh Rasmussen, former Danish head. So it at least speaks to the first inclination or the first reaction of where people are at least getting their advice. 100% on the reporting, and that matters, but across it just seems as if untrained diplomats are having an outsized influence like they've never had before.
Thank you so much. I'm pleased to see that this discussion is flourishing. I could go on longer, but I would like to open the floor to questions from the audience now. I'm going to take two, and then we will see how we respond. Maybe here in the first row.
Thank you very much for this very insightful panel. My name is Sonja Meyer. I'm a MAIS 2 student here at the DA. I have a question regarding what Brigadier General Rottenberger said in his opening statement, but possibly also interesting to the other panelists, with regard to the blurring of the lines between war and peace and hybrid activities. We've heard a lot about state-to-state threats, but not so much about non-state actors. And I was just wondering, what weight would you give to non-state actors, for example, organized criminal groups? We've had the Wagner Group, we've had World Typhoon with China, and they're often being used as hybrid threats from states to states, but also as non-state actors themselves. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the question. Yeah, maybe right there next to you.
Hi, I'm Paul. I'm from Vienna. I wanted to ask about basically not only the when it comes to diplomacy. For me, it's not only foreign policy; it's also to some part also domestic policy. You know, and when you have the foreign minister talking about certain stuff, they also often communicate inwards towards to their population as well. And what I feel like talking about is changing world order and so on, is often there's a lack of awareness, certainly, in the population about the necessity for increased defense spending and increased foreign policy efforts and so on. So, like, even though it has certainly increased since the war in Ukraine, the awareness that we need more and more sort of not only soft power but also hard power, like, would you say, what role can diplomacy play in increasing the awareness for the necessity for increasing hard power in Europe?
Thank you so much for the question. I would give the question to my panelists, and then we're going to do a second round. Dr. Rottenberger, would you like to go first on the first question regarding the role of non-state actors?
Yeah,
it was
okay.
addressed to you.
Yeah, well, that's a wide field. Thank you for the question. Would me take at least half an hour to respond to that in the full scale. Yeah, in the full scale. So we have non-state actors who look like non-state actors, but maybe they are directed by governments. Yeah, and we know those non-state actors who, giving an example, an NGO here in Europe, who is funded by a foreign power and is included in that disinformation campaign. Yeah? And we have now valid proof for the use of organized crime in Western Europe, organized crime organization in Western Europe, used as agents by foreign intelligence services. East of Europe, if you know what I mean. Yeah, so that's not something new. That's not something new. As we had in the early 2000s, private militarized companies working for states and feel not accountable. I'll give you the example of Iraq. Yeah, those BMCs working in Iraq, BMCs like you mentioned, Wagner. Both in the Ukraine and in Africa. That's nothing new. And earlier on, we had terrorist groups, non-state actor terrorist groups, who were funded, trained, and logistically supported, including intelligence by states. That's nothing new. The picture is more blurred. Yeah, it's more blurred. But I would put the emphasis on disinformation campaign, non-state actors in disinformation campaigns, and sabotage, at least what concerns here Europe.
Thank you so much. For the second question, that was about the role of diplomacy in internal affairs, so about the awareness and how it's going to respond. Dr. Vietze, maybe you would like to say something to that?
I think for this question also Mr. Rottenberger should be in the driving seat, because Austria has this problem, is doing actually a lot to raise the awareness in the country. Where in Austria, I think 2-3 years ago, the threat perception was close to zero. Yeah, but that's changing, and you have good strategies to do so. But I also wanted to take up the first question. I mean, you have disinformation, you have sabotage, and you have the platforms for that. Yeah, and in my we had yesterday, we had a very interesting panel with an Austrian living in Great Britain who is working on internet security. Yeah, and with the analysis that Europe is by far not doing enough to force big tech companies to reduce the threat to Europe on many, many levels, which is coming through those networks. Among them, this disinformation issues, but that goes much deeper. Yeah, you have for instance, TikTok, which is very much focused on single countries kind of technologies in place. For Europe, US, China is much different. And then you see that they are not just like a catastrophe. No, it's players. It's people who act on us. It's a kind of warfare. Yeah, to influence our societies, to spread disinformation. All that is not just happening, it's being done. And there the EU is far too reluctant to react. And that was the outcome yesterday among the specialists. And there you see just one single piece where inside the EU there's a slow, awfully cumbersome way to make decisions. And then you still need to convince everybody to really do something. But that's going on. It takes time. But you have these non-state actors, big tech companies who play a role in our life now, which is absolutely unacceptable. You have to understand this, and then you have to be specific on the way they are being used.
Thank you. Thank you so much for this assessment. Do we have time for another round of questions? Okay, I will take 2 more questions.
While you do it, I just want, in case my boss is watching, I just need to plug something. GLOBSEC just came out with a report, the Crime Nexus Terror, which has a whole methodology explaining how Russia is working with the mafia for these attacks, plausible deniability, recruitment, and it has been targeted 110 kinetic attacks against Europe, or attempts, 110, where 80 plus were successful and 20 were foiled. But as I said, pay for play with the Kremlin and the mafia is nothing new, but this is just an extension of, how states are waging wars against other states. So if you're watching, boss, I got it.
Thank you. Maybe here in the first row again. Not first row, but third.
Thank you. I just quickly want to build on the question of disinformation, and as I regard misinformation and also disinformation coming from Russia or generally as a very dangerous tool to destabilize societies, I wanted to ask Mr. Hilton what European states actively do against Russian disinformation campaigns. Thank you.
Thank you very much. My name is Sarah. I'm also a second-year student at the Diplomatic Academy. And we heard a lot about rearmament. And so my question is, how realistic is still a meaningful progress in disarmament? And how do you see existing frameworks that we have, and we have a lot of them, do they still play a role in the future? So can they have a stabilizing or maybe regulatory effect on rearmament efforts? Or do you think that they will just get sidelined more and more? Thank you.
Thank you so much for your questions. I think we can give the first question directly to Roger about destabilization and disinformation.
So just to be clear, I'm no disinformation expert. I can kind of give you big points. Having working with the students at the DA and working with high school students back in Canada, I think one thing that governments need to do is that there needs to be social media hygiene taught at the earliest levels of gymnasium or at high school. Some of these laws, like Australia and Canada, have looked into about banning social media for 16 is not a full solution, but having people realize the power and how they're plugged in is something that they should do. constantly talking about it vigilantly. The strategy has changed now, at least on the NATO level, about naming and shaming, right? So when there is disinformation going out, now they are calling it out and they are attributing it, even if it's not 100%, which is a change in doctrine. And one specific situation I would really, really encourage you to look into is if you have trolls online, you need to look into the Lithuanian elves. And these are volunteer people across Lithuania who in their free time between drinks, coffee, and bagels are out there debunking this disinformation going on. So the government can only do so much, and it needs to be a full of society approach. I think both of you guys are familiar with this total defense concept coming out of Sweden, where...
And Austria.
Yeah, and Austria. It's very easy to protect your skies with physical hardware, but the one thing that is the most vulnerable and the hardest to protect is thinking and critical thinking in your brain. So I'm not sure if I answered it, but that's my take on it.
Thank you so much for the answer. I think it's very interesting and very crucial topic to discuss. Who would like to answer the question on disarmament and the regularity effect?
I would make a start, and I think I hand over then to you. Most of our lives, at least for the two of us, if I look at you, sorry, pose the question, we lived in a historical period. Yeah? Disarmament, let's say, in the 20th century, right after World War I, and then at the last phase of the Cold War. We didn't know that it was the last phase of the Cold War, the disarmament phase of the 1970s, 1980s, led to the collapse of the Soviet Union and the Warsaw Pact, and what came afterwards, what Francis Fukuyama called the end of history. Just want to tell you, I would say it was not the end of history. We took vacation from history, and vacation is over now. I'm sorry, it's not the season for disarmament. Yeah, and we're in an armaments race, let's say in East Asia, for more than a decade. Some people talk about 2 decades. If you look on armament cells in the Gulf region, in East Asia, South Asia, we just follow this trend, and you cannot disconnect, and you cannot enforce rearmament and at the same time call for disarmament. I'm very sorry. This is not the season. I'm very sorry. I wish it would be, but we're living in a world. I don't know. Was it the Canadian Prime Minister who said it in Davos about living in a jungle and you have the predators around? That's the world we're living in. So I only can say, Europe, wake up. Yeah, sorry.
Thank you, Dr. Rottenberger.
I'm very often now spoilers in such discussion and presentations. I'm sorry.
Maybe Dr. Vietze, last positive word.
Not really, because I mean, one thing must be clear. I mean, before you start with disarmament, on both sides there's to be credible deterrence, and the actors must be clear. That's also not the case right now. Yeah? But there's another sub-level to that. Like, let me talk a little bit about the CTBTO here in Vienna, the nuclear test ban organization. What reason on earth should any of the nuclear powers have to dismantle this kind of system? Yeah? Maybe if somebody thinks of testing by themselves, but they still would like to preserve this network of stations worldwide where you see exactly if somebody is taking plutonium out of the fuel rod in a nuclear activity. Everybody would like to preserve the system, and to know which kind of explosion is going on. So this kind of arms control will still be meaningful despite all sides now being on the track to first build up the necessary deterrence, because everybody is in a new situation, new armaments, new kinds of defense mechanisms, new alliances, all that's going on. But what I said first is disarmament needs credible deterrence. Otherwise it has never worked, never ever. So step 1, step 2.
Thank you so much. And I think with this, we are coming to an end of our second panel. In the interest of time, I'm going to wrap it up quickly. I think we heard a lot of interesting opinions and valuable insights into the future of Europe, risk and opportunities for emerging and middle powers. We see the threats of China and Russia. Depends on how we're going to respond to them. And I think also what is very valuable, or my key takeaway, is the issue of risk perception, and that we have to redefine power, especially in Europe. I think we also have some very good takeaways for us diplomatic students in terms of we need to be optimistic and we need to work together. Yeah, it's a challenge for the future. But for now, I wish you all a nice lunch break. The next panel is at 2. It's panel 3, Drivers of Disruption. And yeah, thank you all for being here. Hope you enjoyed it.